Disclaimer, I'm very sick, so my voice is kind of messed up, but I didn't want to leave it any longer. So yeah.
We won't greenlight a film until we have a finished script we're happy with. It's always gonna be quality first no matter what.
So when Supergirl was first announced, I guess I was somewhat excited. I've been a huge fan of the first season of House of the Dragon, so putting Millie Alcock in the role of Kara was, I thought, an interesting choice. And then we also have the announcement of Jason Momoa returning to the DC universe as Lobos this time around. And despite my slim to none prior knowledge of the character, I thought this would be a cool choice. I mean, he's a funny guy. And then Superman released, which I ended up liking quite a bit. Kara's small cameo scene towards the end with Clark, I thought worked really well. It showed us where the character would be mentally at the start of Supergirl. It seemed like they were really leaning in on her backstory and really going down this darker, more mature route to the story and exploring how such a tragedy would affect Kara and the baggage that would come with that and how that contrasts with Superman's experience. There's a lot to explore there. I loved her back and forth with David Cornsweet, and I was excited to see them interact more on screen and how their philosophies would combat each other and their strategies to deal with that, as they're these two opposite sides to, I guess, the same coin. Over time though, my expectations managed to fall lower and lower. Peacemaker season 2 released, and while it did win me over in some aspects, it had some extremely glaring flaws that really made me lose a lot of faith in James Gunn and the scripts he writes and greenlight. Then the trailers came out and they were fine, I guess. They weren't bad, but they didn't really invoke much excitement or hype around the movie. They were just basic, you know, cookie cutter action movie trailer slot. So when June rolled around, part of me was really hoping to go into the theater and come out with a sense of relief and optimism for the future of this new franchise. So did that end up being the case? No, it did not. And in fact, after seeing it, I'm still left wanting the same stuff as I went into the movie hoping to get in the first place. Positives first though, the performances did really work here. I thought Millie Alcock as Kara was great. She manages to really bring her own identity and charm to the role while still feeling familiar to previous iterations of the character. David Cornsweet was in parts of this, and his scenes opposite Kara were honestly the best parts of the movie for me. I really buy their dynamic and their contrast. I think the more we see David as Superman, the more it just cements the fact of how good a casting he was in the first place. I just wish we had Kara and Superman actually doing stuff. Most of the screen time they share is either just flashbacks or Kara just filling Superman in on events of the movie. They never actually share a situation together. There's no opportunity to see them really do anything. The movie ends with Kara finally back on Earth with Clark, and you're left wondering how much better a movie this could have been if this was where we started in the first place. But what about Kara's journey and character arc? I'll get to that, but spoilers, it didn't really work for me. Lobos was a highlight. He really made every scene he was in somewhat entertaining. Probably the only consistently funny character. And I liked his dynamic with Ruthie. Yeah, that's basically it for positives, at least for now. And just to preface, I have not read Woman of Tomorrow. I know this is essentially an adaptation of that story. This review is, I guess, based entirely on just the movie. Yes, I could be missing some, I guess, context I don't have, but I do imagine the majority of people going into this movie would be in the same position as me. Let me know in the comments though. You know, let's move on. I think what this movie ultimately gave us could have been given to us in a 40-minute Disney Plus special equivalent kind of project and achieved the same outcome. I got to the end of the movie and Kara really doesn't feel all that different as a character compared to where she began. You know, they set it up so that she basically goes through, you know, the classic mentorship arc where throughout the runtime, she's in charge of looking after basically a younger version of herself who makes similar mistakes as her, which Kara, through helping Ruthie, then reflects on and learns from. The problem is that, you know, it feels like so much of the time we spend isn't really focused on Kara's part to play in all this, at least not in any significant way. There's only 10 to 15 minutes where they really delve into her backstory much at all through this flashback sequence on Krypton, and it is an effective scene, but it ends and then it never really feels like we do much with that. It just ends up being exposition. So you end up with this 2-hour movie to set up Kara, I guess, for the DCU, that besides basic introductions and getting acquainted with the character, it just never really feels necessary or justified in its existence. I know some people will disagree with me, and I wish I did too, but I don't. The actual plot of the movie is some of the most by the numbers action stuff as well. Funny thing is, this is the second movie in a row in this franchise of 2 movies to use Crypto's well-being as a plot device to move these characters around. around. Crypto gets poisoned by Krem for some reason, so Supergirl has to go with Ruthie to track him down and get an antidote. What follows is basically just a goose chase across a bunch of no-name Guardians of the Galaxy-esque locations with some action scene cut in between. So not only do you have this subpar character work, but it's just cut in with some of the most mediocre, bare-bones superhero plot structure reminiscent of Phase 4 MCU movies. I fully believe that not every superhero movie has to be this rich character study, but if the film isn't even doing its job as an entertainment property, then you fundamentally failed the genre. I really didn't like the visuals either. It manages to borrow so much from the style of the Guardians movie while a lot of the time looking like a significantly lower budget version. There were smaller characters in this that were so distracting because I swear I've seen them before in the Guardians movie. You know, one of my biggest positives about Superman and what that movie introduced was it created this unique and distinct visual identity that we hadn't seen before in any other major comic franchises or movie, which with the amount of saturation in the genre, it's not an easy feat to do. This movie manages to throw so much of that whimsical, color and feel away in place of the industry default. Lastly, speaking of industry default, what really cements this for me as a pure poster child of, superhero mediocrity is its main villain, Krem, who manages to be one of the most, evil written superhero villains, yet still provides zero sense of stakes or danger to the narrative. I think with the same saturation of comic book media these days, it has become increasingly clear just how important having a good villain is for the genre. I truly believe it is one of the most significant and important aspects to separate your story from the massive pile of slop that we get released. The term superhero fatigue has been steadily increasing over the years in its use, and I think this movie is unfortunately bound to become the new poster child for that term. It's been so long since I've seen such a pure example of what I imagine people mean when they use that term. And it does hurt to say this because I really did want to like this movie. I'll make an end of year thoughts video on the DCU once Lanterns and Clayface is out and the Blue Beetle series if they decide to release it this year. Still gotta finish Creature Commandos 2. I couldn't really get into that. But yeah, Supergirl for me is unfortunately a 3 out of 10. I really hope they do manage to turn this around.